Hey, it's Benjie Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benjie@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Joab Stieglitz. We'll be discussing his fantastic book, The Old Man's Request, Book 1 of the Utgarda series. Now, guys, I say book 1, so of course, if there's a book 1, there's got to be a book 2. Well, in this series, there's even a third, okay? Now, you need to do yourself a favor. Though all the books are available through Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. But listen, Joab has 2 personal sites that are really going to have everything that he has to offer. Now, the first one is joabstieglitz.com, and then we have joabstieglitzbooks.com. That's JoabStieglitz.com. And then, of course, the second one, Joab Stieglitz, same spelling, but then addonbooks.com. And when you go to his personal site, not only will you find more information on himself, but you'll also find the 5 other books that he has currently published. That's right, there's 5 other books available to be purchased at this moment. But Joab just completed a 7th book, okay? So that one is still in creation. It's in the final stages of publication. So it's not available just yet, but make sure you're checking back in frequently to purchase that 7th book the moment it's available. So one more time, that's joabstieglitz.com and joabstieglitzbooks.com. You know, and I will say, Joab was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business, Good River Print and Media Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, do yourself a favor and contact our great friends over there at Good River. You can find out more information on them at goodriverprintandmedia.com. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Joab, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you?
Thank you, Benjie. It's great to be here. I'm doing well.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it's a pleasure having you on, and truly an honor for you to be a guest with us today. And listen, Joab, I know we have so much information to cover, but before we jump into the book, let's hold off slightly. Start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
Okay. My name is Joab Stieglitz. I'm originally from New Jersey. I currently live in Virginia. For my day job, I'm an application consultant for a software company. But I'm a passionate tabletop role-playing gamer, game master for horror and espionage, fantasy, science fiction, stuff like that. And back in the 90s, I ran a game called Call of Cthulhu with 8 players, and that ended up going on for about 5 years. And I took really detailed notes of that game. And many years later, I dug up that binder and I said, hey, this would be a good book. So I novelized some of it.
Joab, without further ado, The Old Man's Request. Tell us a little bit more about your book, and then, if you can, the series of books that follow.
Well, The Old Man's Request is the first in the trilogy. I call the Utgarda Trilogy. And it follows the premise of what would you do if someone you respect, who you owe your career to, asked you to do a strange favor. And this is what happens to our heroes. The story revolves around Anna Rykov, who is a Russian-American archaeologist in 1929 New York. And of course, as a female professional who could be a Bolshevik, she has trouble finding a job. So when the aging trustee of the college offers her a post, she accepts, and there she meets 2 other adjunct faculty, a doctor and a priest. And the 3 of them become friends. A year later, the old man asks them to address an indiscretion from his youth that cost one man his sanity and another his life. And they accept, and the book is about how they deal with that. Along the way, we discover that they are uniquely qualified, or perhaps predestined, to pursue this adventure.
So that's the first book. Now, of course, this is book 1. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Joab, but there's 3 books in the series. So talk to us a little bit more in depth about the second book and maybe the third book, of course, without giving too much away.
Of course. All right. In the second book, which is called The Missing Medium, our heroes go to New York City to speak with a spiritualist about a conversation he had with the trustee before the trustee dies. That's spoiler alert, he died in the first book. But when they go to New York, they find that the spirit guide, the medium, is missing. And instead, they come across monsters, gangsters, and cultists. And eventually, they learn where the medium is. Well, when they go to rescue him, they learn that he is trapped in another dimension. And Anna and one of her colleagues, Dr. Lamb, Harry, must travel into the realm of the medium's own imagination, from which they must rescue both him and themselves. In the third book, The Other Realm. And that's the first trilogy.
Fantastic. You know, Joab, I'm curious. Let's go into the concept of inspiration. Now, as you stated, your background is not in creative writing. Now, you have particular interests, but that is, of course, completely separate from what your day-to-day career is. So first and foremost, what inspired you to embark upon a creative journey and become a writer? Were there artists, people that inspired you? Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Well, I've always been a writer of sorts. My career has gravitated around technical writing. And they say that every technical writer is a novelist in hiding. But I've always been a creative person. I've been playing these role-playing games since I was a teenager. And that involves inspiration and creation and storytelling and such. However, the push to write the novels and publish them came about, maybe 8 years ago, when a friend of mine named Steve Russell encouraged me. He was actually a publisher of game materials, and he was running a game for us. And when he learned that I had these stories, he really pushed me to write them and publish them. And with his prodding and encouragement, the first book, The Old Man's Request, was produced. Unfortunately, Steve was killed in a car accident before the book came out, and never got to see the finished product.
Oh man, I'm very sorry to hear that, Joab. So we have the inspiration for the books. Now, next question that I want to go into, let's talk about the research. Now, of course, these are fictional narratives. So in large part, they're created from your imagination, again, as I stated, for entertainment purposes. Now, right there in the subtitle of the book, The Old Man's Request, Book 1 of the Utgarda series. Now, that word, Utgarda, clearly is not a created word. That's not a fictional word. So talk to us a little bit more about some of the research that you may have done in preparation for this book.
Well, my main character, Anna Rykov, is a Russian American, and I made her study, or her specialty, the Varangians, were the Vikings who traveled the rivers of Russia versus the North Sea. And along the way, I found everybody's talking about Loki, given the TV show and the Thor movies and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Utgarda was a Varangian name for Loki, the god of mischief. So it kind of just flowed together, if you will. And Utgarda Loki was the trickster god, who literally means Loki of the Outlands. So I'm thinking, he sounds alien, extraterrestrial. And that fit in well with the game mechanic of Call of Cthulhu, where you're fighting extra-dimensional beings. So I used him as the background antagonist. And, in the book, or books, I should say, Utgarda is a shape-shifting extra-dimensional intelligence whose motives are unknown, but somehow leads Anna on adventures involving entities that are alien or dangerous to humanity. Mm-hmm. And the rest kind of just fell into place.
Again, here on the line with Joab Stieglitz, we're discussing his fantastic book, The Old Man's Request, available for purchase through Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, but also make sure you're checking into his personal sites, joabstieglitz.com, joabstieglitzbooks.com. There you'll find this book, as well as the 5 other titles that he's written and published at this moment. But then there's still that last one that is still in creation, so make sure you're checking back in frequently to purchase it as soon as it's available. Joab, of course, we've talked about this book, and we've talked about this series briefly. Now, there are 3 other books that you have written that is in a completely other series entirely. Talk to our listening audience a little bit more about those other books that you've written as well, please.
Well, the first 3 books, the Utgarda series, again, are set in 1929 New York, right before the Depression hit, the height of the Roaring '20s. The second series are set the following winter. So it's July 1930, the Depression has set, and Anna Rykov, through the events of the first trilogy, has become an investigator of weird phenomena. And in that first book of the second series, called The Hunter in the Shadows, she has this weird dream that she is in. And she's chasing someone through the jungle, and she finds some ruins. And in those ruins, she discovers an ancient civilization that predated the humanity. And they're like crocodile men. And she discovers another person wounded in the ruins. And he's a British archaeologist. The one she was chasing, and why we were chasing him we don't know, was a German archaeologist. Well, she wakes up from that dream to learn that a British archaeologist has requested an appointment with her and her boss, discuss an issue that is too secret to discuss remotely. And we meet him and learn that he is, in fact, inhabited by an alien who's enlisting Anna to find another alien, a shape changer, who is lurking in Boston and is planning to meet with the same German archaeologist she saw in her dream. So these 3 elements from her dream have suddenly become reality. And if the German and the alien meet, it will cause a cataclysm in which trillions will die. Now, this is 1930, and you might be thinking World War II, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But he says that if these 2 meet, the cataclysm will be even worse than that. So Anna travels to Boston to suss that out. Along the way, she gains the attention of J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, and assists the homeless of Boston, the Hooverville there, in dealing with people going missing. Turns out that the alien was taking them, and Anna deals with the alien. The next book is called The Worlds I Know. And in that book, based on her experiences in Boston, Anna is sent to England where they have uncovered a strange tomb during a mining survey. And the British were encouraged by Hoover to use Anna's talents. And she arrives there in all secret, and she has a meeting with the top English officials. I try to throw history in there where possible, who aren't too pleased to have her there in the first place. But they agree to have her check it out. They assign her a bodyguard, not a bodyguard, a watchdog. And she goes out to investigate these ruins and finds herself back in that other realm from Book 3 of the Utgarda Trilogy, but a modern version of it, in which she is the descendant of the person who caused the apocalypse there, or the cataclysm as they call it. And she is vilified. And The Worlds I Know is about dealing with being in that other world and the consequences of her actions in her previous travel to that dimension. And the third book, which is yet untitled, resolves that situation.
Joab, being an artist myself, and my listening audience knows this, I'm in a different medium. I'm an actor and a filmmaker based here in Los Angeles. But I love having this platform to be able to pay it forward, in a sense, to other artists out there listening in this regard, specifically other writers out there listening in. Now, regardless of whether or not your background is in writing, or regardless of whether or not this is something that you've done all your life, it is clear, man, you are a bona fide author, right? You are an accomplished author. You've published 6 books, one still on the horizon. So I'd love to take this opportunity to really pick your brain. Any words of wisdom that you can offer a new writer, someone out there listening in right now, just starting out, what words of wisdom would you be able to relate to them?
Well, it's the words of wisdom that were thrown at me many times by a number of people, and that is write. Just write whenever you can. You don't have to write, paragraphs or sentences or whole stories. Just write things down. Write down ideas, little snippets here and there, and eventually, some of them will piece together and become something. The other thing I would recommend is, if you want to be a writer, write regularly. Write every day. You don't have to spend the day doing it. A lot of people say, write at the same time in the same place, but just write. Write things in a regular rhythm so you get in the habit of putting things on paper. Before I wrote these books, I started another book, a Tolkien-esque journey tale. And, the first quarter of it came out all at once. And then it was a couple years later before I wrote the next third. And then a big time period passed again before I wrote another chunk of it. And finally it was 300 pages, wasn't going anywhere. It changed genres along the way because of those gaps. So write as often as you can and try to do it on a regular schedule. Those are the 2 key pieces to writing, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that piece of advice. What's great? We've discussed 6 books today, each of them very brief, but yet we've barely scratched the surface. There is still so much left to be discovered in every one of the novels that we've touched up on. And that's why the onus is on you. There's no getting around it. Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, JoabStieglitz.com, and JoabStieglitzBooks.com are the places you have to go. The Old Man's Request is the title you have to pick up, and Joab Stieglitz is the author you have to thank for bringing it to your table. And remember, The Old Man's Request was just the main anchor for today's interview. The 5 other books, soon to be 6, are also available through the site. So do yourself a favor, get lost in the journey. You surely will not be disappointed. Joab, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Thank you very much. It's been fun.